Wide receiver. This is the position that excites me amongst the most. As a fantasy football connoisseur, you got to get ready for all these dynasty drafts. It's the position that I really dive into, arguably the most in the entire cycle. So I'm very excited. I know Logan and Marissa, you guys are very excited to talk receivers as well. So again, let's just get right into it. No need to beat around the bush or anything. Dive right into the rankings with our number 5. So basically what we're going to do is go through our top 5 rankings. Each of us have different lists. We don't know who's got who, where. There's going to be surprises. It's part of the fun here. Then we're going to project out some first round grades and who we think is going to go in the first round. And then we'll get to some sleepers, guys who we didn't get to talk about in the top 5, but we still want to shed some light on as day 2 or even day 3 guys that we do really like in this class. So, Marissa, why don't you kick us off with your wide receiver number 5?
Number 5 wide receiver is out of UNC, Josh Downs. Really like him. He's 5'9", 171, but he plays way bigger than his size. You see him go out there and constantly battle for those contested catches for his size and win. Like, that's what you want out of a wide receiver, honestly, is someone who plays with that type of mindset is going to go out there and fight. He's twitched up too, great in open space, and really the acrobatic catches that he makes too. He's a true quarterback-friendly receiver that's going to be a wide receiver to rely on. His size does limit him when going up against press man coverage, which is a little bit hesitant and why he isn't like a number 4, number 3 wide receiver for me. And he did struggle with a little bit of drops. Not too big of a deal. Maybe he can fix it in the NFL, but it is a concern that keeps him at 5.
Yeah.
Logan, are you going the same way with this one? I feel like you are.
Yeah, I'm right there with it. I mean, I think, this wide receiver class, I don't think it's that good as a whole, but I think a lot of these guys are very close to one another. Like a lot of these wide receivers for me grade out very similarly, but, it kind of goes back to what we talked about in our tight ends. So go check out that video too. It's just everybody's got a little bit of a different flavor to them. I think Josh Downs comes in, 5 is a really good spot for him just because he does do a lot of things really well. He's explosive. He's good with the ball in his hands, but he's a little smaller. I think that doesn't necessarily matter. Like, there's still plenty of paths to be a good small receiver in the NFL. There's plenty of examples, but it's just, the hit rate is a little lower, obviously. And it's like, not that this matters to me either, but I'm always a little cautious on guys that just play with some of the best quarterbacks in the nation, because that just makes their job so much easier. And Drake May is fantastic. It's not a knock on him or anything, but it does. You show what you can do a little bit more in college when you're playing with a really good quarterback. I think that's what Josh Downs is. He's a smaller guy, explosive, going to be pretty much not slot only, but like that's probably where he's going to thrive the most. Fun player for sure, but there's definitely some risk as well still.
Yeah, I'm actually pivoting in a different direction at number 5 here. This player I do really like. I think he's a fun sleeper in this class. If he'll still probably go day 2, but I think he's being underrated. People are starting to come around to him though. It's like possibly the 5th best receiver. It's a weak number 5. This class at the receiver position isn't great. It isn't. I do like some guys. It's not bad, but it's not great, especially compared to some other years. I've got Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. I really, really do like Marvin Mims. Speaking of small receivers, he is definitely undersized. He's basically the same frame as Josh Downs. But when we look at it, he's got sub 4.4 speed, and it shows on tape. Like, he made so many plays down the field for the Sooners with Caleb Williams. And then in this past year, when Caleb Williams transferred, his production didn't hiccup. He was still extremely productive, still an absolute target hog. And despite that small size, he plays way bigger than that. Like, as a run blocker, he's attacking DBs. He's going at them at the catch point downfield. I don't know, some of the plays he makes, it's like uncanny for dudes his size. Just going up, winning at the catch point, being physical. Who knows how well that's going to translate in the NFL because of his lack of size. But because that mindset is there and he's done it so many times on tape, I'm intrigued, and I have some confidence for this early declare that's still pretty young. Again, the college production was there. He's got the speed. He can win deep. Still want to see a little bit more from his route tree, but I think that can develop in the league. He can make plays with the ball in his hands too, because he is so twitchy and he's so fast. So Mims can just do a lot of things, and he can do a lot of things pretty damn well. Not going to be a number 1 receiver, but I think he could be a really nice complementary piece in the league.
I agree.
Let's move on to number 4 now. I think we all have the same top 4, just probably in different orders. And I'm really excited to see these different orders. Marissa, I want you to go first on this one as well, because we were talking in the back office and you said, I know there's a bit of a consensus top 3, although that it does seem to be changing, but yours is a bit different. So you might have a bit of a surprise here at number 4.
Yes, the top 3 is usually Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison. Well, I have Jordan Addison here at 4. Look, the impressive stop-start ability, he can manipulate defenders really extremely well because he is a fluid route runner. I like that from him. He carries into traffic very well when he has to find the ball, like zone-wise. IQ, great. He's able to find those open spots in the zone. He's able to adjust. He has everything you want out of a slot receiver. But again, it's a trend with a lot of these receivers is they're good in the slot. Outside production is a little bit iffy. And that's a concern that I have with Addison is he's good when he's open, but he also relies on defensive backs to fall for his false movements way too much. And at the NFL level, when you're going up against these experienced top cornerbacks, how many are actually going to do that is my question, and why he falls at 4.
I get it. I rock with it. I can see it. I have for me my wide receiver 4. Again, these receivers are all very, 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 very close. And I think a lot of this guy's kind of trending in the opposite direction, like where you're kind of talking about with Addison going down a little bit. I gotta say Flowers. I think that like he's very fun. He's very, 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 very fun. And I'll be the first to tell you that he's got a very high upside in the league. But I think the odds of hitting that are just a little bit lower than some of the guys ahead of him for me. Obviously, you have the same concerns with Downs a little bit. He's smaller. He's obviously better than Downs to me too. But Flowers is just, these smaller guys that like do a lot well in college, like physically, it's harder to translate that in the NFL at the end of the day. But again, him being my wide receiver 4 is like half a point lower than my wide receiver 3. You know what I mean? Like he's my wide receiver 4, but it's not by a lot by any means. He's still a phenomenal player. And if he's your 2, your 1, I really don't care either. Like I can totally see that. He's just these smaller guys that dominate the way he did. It's a little bit, they're not going to play the same with the NFL. That doesn't mean they're not going to be good, but he's going to be more of your get the ball in his hands. Obviously he's going to get open, but you got to do a little bit more. It's hard. You can't just naturally throw to him as well as some of these bigger guys. But just, there's high ceiling. The odds of hitting his ceiling are just a little bit lower than some of the guys above him to me.
Yeah, Zay Flowers is my number 4 as well. And it's not far off from my number 3, which Marissa, spoiler, may coincide with who you just put at number 4. So it's close. Flowers, I will say this, just one thing. I still view Flowers at a very high light. I'm not too concerned with him busting, to be completely honest. But I'm going to refer to him. He is a senior declare out of the ACC. Why does that matter? For some reason, this is kind of, it's a huge point for me in the receiver evaluation. Evaluating the competition these guys played and whether they declared in their junior years or their senior years of college is a massive indicator as to their NFL success. For these guys that come from the SEC or the Big Ten, those are the 2 conferences that produce a ton of successful NFL receivers. If you're a junior declare, or what I call an early declare, that is also a much higher hit rate than these seniors. Zay Flowers happens to be a senior declare out of the ACC. Again, he's good enough to where I think he can trump that, right? But when I refer to that stuff, it's just a little food for thought, something to add into your evaluation out there. That's not really the case for many positions, but for some reason at receiver, it is extremely indicative of guys that are going to pan out in the league and those who aren't. It really helps me weed out a ton of these receivers. You see all the hype on Twitter, but then I look at it and I'm like, well, he doesn't wow me as a prospect. And he's the senior declare coming from the non-SEC or Big Ten conferences. I'm probably out on that player in most cases. Again, Flowers, though, is special enough to where I'm not. And I actually have him at number 4, and I'm very intrigued because, man, is this dude an explosive athlete. He is so fun with the ball in his hands where he can just make a ton of guys miss. In terms of winning as a route runner, he's pretty much done it at every alignment, every level. I'm not calling him an elite or the best route runner in this class, but man, he can line up in the slot. He even lined up outside at BC. The body control and ball skills are really fun down the field. He can snap off routes pretty quickly. One of the concerns is going to be his size. Can he consistently line up on the outside? How is he going to do against press? We really didn't see a ton of that either in his college tape. But no, the college production was there. He's got the upside to be like a really, really fun wide receiver 2 in an offense.
Yeah.
And honestly, at his highest apex, at his ceiling, he's probably a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. But I think his safe projection is a nice number 2. I that's where I feel comfortable with Zay Flowers right now.
I like it.
Yeah, that's where I stand on him. But let's talk a little Addison, because I think he's my wide receiver 3. And Marissa was just talking about Addison. Logan, I want to let you touch up on this as well. Is Addison your number 3?
He is not.
Okay, so we'll save your thoughts on Addison for
Yeah.
later, but I'll touch up on this one first just because I wanted to kind of coincide with Marissa. I think Addison's tape actually at USC was a bit disappointing last year. I expected
Totally
a
agree.
little bit more from him, especially like on the outside. He's another one of these undersized receivers, but I still do have hope just because he's so smart. Just because he was so productive, just because he has the speed to win downfield, just because he's such a good route runner that he can have inside-outside versatility. And he's somebody that can survive on the outside, at least in most matchups in the league. Again, maybe we need to see more against press. The size is very concerning. He measured in a lot smaller and lighter than I thought he would come combine time, which was concerning. But man, he just wins in so many different ways. The production at both Pittsburgh and even USC, for as disappointing as it was, I think a lot of that's just our expectations were so damn high. Like, Addison, he's fantastic. He's playing with Caleb Williams. He was still awesome. He was still absolutely incredible. Between him and Flowers, I mean, again, he's an early declare from USC, so it's a bit more intriguing than the stuff that I talked about with Flowers. But I will say, in the Flowers department, for Marissa's case, Flowers is a better athlete. There's no denying that. He is. He's more explosive to me. I think his body control is a little bit better on some of those, in terms of ball skills. It's kind of close, but I really was intrigued by Flowers' ball skills. I think it's in his body control especially, and I think that's maybe the most underrated portion of his game. So they're pretty close for me, honestly. I've enjoyed how the gap is really tightened between Flowers and Addison, but I still got to give Jordan the edge.
No. Do you want me to talk about my 3? You want me to talk about Addison? What direction would you like me to take this?
Here's the thing, Logan. I want to give you the freedom on that because we are on number 3 right now.
Okay.
So I'll let you. Why don't you just go with your number 3, and then you can save your Addison words for later.
Okay. So my number 3 is Quentin Johnson. Sorry, but the thing for me, like, he is just, I think throughout this draft cycle, he's been the toughest player for me to evaluate. The guy has such high highs and so terribly low lows. It's so frustrating. But obviously, not similarly it's similar for different reasons. It reminds me a lot of how I feel about Duncan Cade. The upside, if all things go right for him, is elite, like one of the best of the best. But the downside is just so scary for me. He has a lot to like. He's big, he's tall, he's fast, he's strong. He has everything you want, but then you look at his tape and he's catching balls in his chest. He's not really getting open all that much. He's not high pointing the best. He's so weird. When he looks good, he looks so freaking good. But again, when he looks bad, it's so frustrating because you're just like, what are you doing? So just for my sanity, I slot him right in the middle just because he has the widest range of outcomes of any of the top receivers. And if I'm drafting early, if you want to draft for upside, go for it. I'm not going to argue that at all. But I don't want to, I try to avoid bust rate a little bit to me. And I think he just has a lot of it. It doesn't mean he's not going to be good. He's got a lot of things to be good. But I think a lot also has to go right for him to be good as well.
Marissa, hop in here with your number 3. I don't know if it's Flowers, Johnston, JSN. Where are you going here?
My number 3 is your guys' number 4. It is Zay Flowers. I just give the edge to him at the 3rd position because I like his versatility on motion plays. I think he can do a little bit better at that than Addison, and that's where I kind of give him that edge right there. He has the crisp route running. He's going to make those tight cuts to really stack defensive backs, and he combines that with how he changes tempo and his speed. to really just get defensive backs off of him, and it was extremely impressive. I mean, you look at the offense that he was in as well with Phil Jerkovic, he elevated that offensive play. And that's, again, kind of like with the tight ends with Michael Mayer. Obviously, completely different. Mayer's 1, Flowers is 3, but Flowers was able to elevate that offense, and that's what I like to see out of him. My one big issue with Flowers, though, is, as you alluded to, he faced a lot of easy releases off the line.
Yeah.
If he has to face press, how is he going to handle that? How is he going to be able to really rely on his speed if he can't?
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a fair concern. I think really Flowers and Addison, they aren't the same prospect, but there's a good dose of similarities in terms of strengths and weaknesses. And Flowers has really been on the rise, and Addison's kind of trending down a little bit to the point where this is like a big debate now. Addison versus Flowers, and it feels like consensus is slotting them in as like the debate for the number 3 spot. But consensus is a bit all over the place because this receiver class is crazy. Yeah. I don't want to stray too far away from the Quentin Johnston talk because Logan kind of introduced it there at number 3. I have Johnston at number 2, so I figured we could. That's a good bridge. He is the most frustrating player in this receiving, like easily. Annoying. It's not even. It's Logan. It's not even a debate. It's not. Marissa, would you agree with that? I know you haven't talked about Quentin Johnston yet. Would you agree Quentin Johnston is easily the most frustrating receiver, just in terms of who knows what his range of outcomes are?
I would agree because he is my number 2 as well.
Okay, perfect. This is great. Marissa, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead first?
I mean, it is frustrating because he is more out of every receiver in the top 5 right now. He is your prototypical X. But at the same time, an X receiver, you're supposed to rely on them to be able to get those catches, haul them in away from their frame. And he does that on occasion. There's other times where one play does it, and then the next play he's back to doing the exact opposite. And it's like you want to see that consistency out of him, but at the same time, he wins with his speed. He wins with his size, but not consistently. And that's where the frustration comes in, is because he has this high upside, and if he could just really focus in on doing it consistently, he'd be more in that conversation for number 1. But between number 1 and number 2, there is a large gap because he isn't consistent.
Yeah, I tweeted back in the winter. I had a tweet that was talking about Johnston. Like, in theory, you should be great at the catch point because he's so big, and there are a lot of enticing flashes. But he's a big time body catcher. He just gotta lets the ball come into his frame. He's really not like a natural pass catcher. Caused a bit of a stir on Twitter, but I would like to believe it's true, and I think it sounds like you guys are kind of leaning in the same direction. On top of that, it's not like he's a super expansive route runner or even his college production. His production in terms of target share wasn't really all that great, but I do want to give him a pass because Max Duggan, he got bracketed in some of those games too, like the Georgia game. What do you want him to do? Duggan was not good at all either. No offense. I know Duggan wasn't good in terms of throwing the football, I should say. Be more specific there. But I still think Johnson, in terms of yards per, team target per, I'm all over the place with my metrics here today. But in terms of a lot of those metrics, like yards per target, team passing attempt, stuff like that, Johnson actually checks out pretty well. People are going to helmet scout the TCU receivers and be like, don't know if I can get hurt by that again. I do think Johnson is kind of leaps and bounds ahead of those guys. But what's concerning about it is there are the flaws in terms of, again, the route running, lack of elite college production, the body catching. And it's like, he's still technically raw and the production wasn't out of this world crazy. So that concerns me for a TCU receiver. I get that. And the floor is definitely low with Johnston. But keep in mind, we are talking about a 6'4" mountain of a man with crazy, crazy athletic testing. And it pops on film 24/7. He can make plays with the ball in his hands. He can make plays downfield. Even if he doesn't have a full route tree, even if it takes him a year to get the footwork down and stuff like that, there's no receiver in this class that has the athletic tools at that size that Quentin Johnston does. And Marissa, you mentioned this in the back office before we went live. You said this class is just a ton of slot. There aren't very many true X receivers, true outside guys. That also helps Quentin Johnston because he's one of the only true bigger outside receivers in this draft, and he's really the only one that intrigues me. I know next up it could be Cedric Tillman, Rashee Rice. I don't love those guys. Quentin Johnson, as risky as he is, that upside is undeniable. I love the flashes on the film. You can't teach that frame, that athleticism, all that stuff. He comes in at number 2 for me.
Yeah. For me, obviously you guys number 2 is my 3. For 2, I have Jordan Addison here too. I know I'm a little higher than you guys, but it just goes back to kind of how I talked about it a little bit. He's just so safe at the wide receiver position, and he's not only safe, but he wins so effortlessly. He's so smooth. He's so smart. I feel like that stuff is almost not really teachable at this point. You either got it or you don't. Obviously, you're gonna develop. You're gonna get a little bit more used to the NFL speed, but like he just has that ability. I mean, I will agree that I think we all were expecting maybe a little too much from USC, playing with Caleb Williams, but for as low as I was on Kenny Pickett to have that production in college at Pittsburgh with a quarterback like Kenny Pickett is impressive. He's just super, super smooth. I know he's smaller, but he just feels really safe too. He might not end up being, I will be the first to tell you, he's probably not even have like the top 5 highest upsides out of this wide receiver position. But I think he has probably the second highest floor behind all of our wide receiver ones. Just super solid, man. He just seems like a guy that you're going to be able to rely on time and time again. He might not be, like I said, he might not ever be leading the league in receiving yards and all this stuff, but he's going to be a guy that you can really rely on to catch the football. I kind of like the idea of getting him with more of a, playmaking, scrambling quarterback that can kind of work out of structure. There's just a lot to like about him. He kind of just checks a lot of boxes. He doesn't check anything, fantastically, like from the athletic department at all. But there's just a lot of the things you can't teach, he has. And he's also just an elite route runner, man. Like, if it wasn't for, again, the guy we all have at 1, he's fantastic at that. He's just super smooth. He does everything. He does a lot of the things that people can't really do well. He does them well. That's why that's kind of the difference for me.
Yeah. I hear you on Addison. I do. I absolutely do. Number 1. Sounds like a consensus for us, unless somebody left JSN again out of their top 5. So this is another consensus at number 1. I just have to say, maybe you guys find this to be a hot take because I'll spice this up a little bit. Jackson Smith-Njigba might be on his own tier for me. He really might. I love him. I do. And maybe part of it too is just I don't love even Quentin Johnson at number 2. I don't love Addison at number 3, although those guys are very good. JSN is special. Don't let people fool you just because he's not an elite athlete and he didn't line up on the outside. He is special. Obviously, there's the whole he outproduced Garrett Wilson when he was a junior and Chris Olave as a senior. When Jackson Smith and Junior, I didn't do this great. When JSN was a sophomore, he outproduced junior Garrett Wilson and senior Chris Olave on the same team. There we go. Part of that, obviously, was he's lining up in the slot. Those guys are on the outside. He had kind of access to easier volume and more volume. But at the same time, that is damn impressive to do.
Yeah.
And Jackson Smith-Njigba, even if he's never a great outside receiver, which I still don't think all hope is lost there, to be completely honest.
I agree.
I don't. Even if he's a slot only, though, and I know there's a lot of slot only guys, he's a special slot only. One of the smartest receivers I've ever evaluated. One of the best route runners I have ever evaluated over the middle of the field. He can find any open hole in zone coverage. He can manipulate, even when he comes matched up with some of these nickel corners, he can manipulate those guys. He manipulates linebackers to a T, no doubt about it. And then it's not like he's just a chain mover. He can make plays with the ball in his hands. Again, not a burner by any means. The vertical speed is not great with Jackson Smith-Njigba. But he's such an angles eraser. The way he sees the field after the catch, where one, if he's facing the line of scrimmage, he's got a defender on his back pocket, he's shaking that guy off. He just feels them on his backside, spins off him, and now he's got some open field to work with. And when he's in the open field, he takes the best angles. He just is an angles eraser. He's shifty enough where he can make some guys miss, but it's the smarts. It's the route running. It's the whole 9 yards there with Jackson Smith-Njigba, and it's backed up by college production as a sophomore at The Ohio State University. arguably it's in the running for wide receiver university.
Mhm.
I don't have enough good stuff to say about Jackson Smith-Njigba. I know the athleticism is going to make people like, is he really that good? No, he is. And I would argue he belongs in a tier of his own in this class.
Yeah. I I agree with everything you said, and I know Marissa has been pounding the table for him for quite some time, so I'm not gonna really spend too much time talking about him, but I did want to talk about something we have brought up a few times, and I think it pertains to him specifically a lot. Just this whole slot receiver thing, and just he's a slot only. He's a slot only, not just for him, but just receivers in general. I don't think that's a bad thing anymore. Like I think just the way the league has gone, like it doesn't matter if you're a slot only guy anymore. If you're good, you're good. If I
Mhm.
can put you in the slot and you're going to be good, awesome. If you can play outside too, awesome. That's fine. I just think that slot receivers are taking over. Everybody's playing the slot. If your wide receiver one is struggling a little bit, you move them in the slot. Like I think the slot is such not I don't want to say underappreciated because it's totally appreciated, but it's just like it's not like a knock. I feel like as it has like
Mm.
it shouldn't be a knock like some people really make it out to be, and especially when you're evaluating a prospect like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I could care less if you view him as a slot only. That should not knock him down to me at all.
Mm. I'm glad we're on the same page with that, Logan. I am. And it's especially, again, if they're a special slot only,
Yeah, like
that's a whole different conversation now. And the slot is it's a key cog to all these NFL offenses
Mhm.
nowadays. And again, I want to be consistent here. I did give Quentin Johnson a bump up a little bit in this
Yeah,
class just because it's like, well, he's really the only big X receiver I
yeah,
like in this
yeah,
class, an outside receiver. At least that we know of full time.
yeah.
Addison could play some of it,
Yeah.
so I
But
want to stay
I think from
consistent.
an evaluating standpoint, that's still fine to
Yeah,
do that because the NFL does value that as well. So it
yeah,
may not be how we feel, but when the NFL values it that way, that you kind of just have to give them a slight bump as well.
yeah.
So,
But the slot only stuff, it's become a little aggravating. Jackson
yeah,
Smith-Njigba was he's a star.
it's good.
And Marissa, I want to give you a chance to touch up on JSN. I'm sorry, I know me and Logan kind of talked a lot about Jackson Smith-Njigba there, but any other thoughts you want to add to the conversation?
Just that I will agree, like every other receiver you can bring up the slot being maybe a little bit of a concern because of like their size and stuff. But Jackson Smith-Njigba, slot only, throw that out the window because he is an elite slot receiver, if
Yes.
that happens to be the case. But the thing is, though, he still had limited snaps on the outside. And what did he do when he had those snaps on the outside? He excelled. So the upside is there for Jackson Smith-Njigba, and that is the most promising thing for him. The outstanding route running. It's an Ohio State thing. You look at Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. It's going to translate with Jackson Smith-Njigba to the NFL. Footwork is precise. His speed, precise. Various route packages, precise. You're getting a very precise player in Jackson Smith-Njigba who you are going to be able to draft in round one, be able to rely on to be a playmaker, whether it's for a veteran quarterback, mid-tier quarterback, rookie quarterback.
Don't
He is
matter.
going to be a reliable target. That quarterback is going to be able to go to 24/7 and know that he is getting production.
Not only just a reliable target from day one with
Yeah.
Jackson Smith-Njigba. The dude's a star. He's a star. Before we get into wide receiver sleepers, let's just quickly touch up on first round stuff. How many of these guys, A, do we think are going to actually get drafted into the first round? And B, how many would we dish out a first round grade for? Marissa, I'll let you start first with this one.
First round grade, there's one, and that's JSN. Personally, he is the only receiver I would grade in the first round because of everything that was mentioned. You have your flaws with everyone else. JSN is you have to be very, very, very nitpicky when it comes to JSN. Everyone else you can kind of see on film. JSN, like I said, you have to be very, extremely precise with your nitpicking with him. So he's the only one I would give a first round grade to. But because of how the receiver position has developed in the NFL, I can see 4 to 5 going in the first round, and maybe even that first round receiver that goes in isn't one of the top 5 that we have in. We left out Jalin Hyatt. He's a guy I could see sneaking into the first round just because he is a burner. So I could see 5, but I would 5 to 4, honestly.
I like it. For
Okay.
me, man, my first round grades with these wide receivers change quite often. The only one that never leaves the conversation is JSN. I think Addison will consistently stay in as a back end of the first round pick for me. And then Quentin Johnson depends the day, man. Like, I don't know how to evaluate this guy, bro. I really don't. He's so tough. It's like I think those three go in the first round for sure. I think Quentin Johnson, as not that any of us are necessarily low on him, but we talk about the concerns a lot. He's just going to go in the first round because of that upside. We all can agree he has that upside. Somebody's going to draft him. So I think I definitely have 2 first round grades, 2.5 if we count Quentin Johnson, and I think 3 will probably go in the first round. But it all depends when that first domino falls. I have no clue. I think that's the hardest thing to predict right now is when the first one falls. I mean, it's for me, it starts around the Texans at 12.
Bingo.
But I can't really see one really going before that. And I
Uh,
mean, I can, but
I
like,
could. I
where do you
could.
like?
Right now I'm looking at, well, first of all, and I know you weren't thinking about it this way, Logan,
Mhm,
but I could see a team just trading up and being like, let me secure a top 10 pick
mhm.
and get my wide receiver one in this class because I know the run is going to start very, very soon. I do think, though, the Bears are still in play at number 9. I do believe they're going to either most likely fall in love with the defensive prospect, or they're going to really like one of these tackles because that's still a position they need to address. Maybe even a slight chance Bijan just because
Yeah. No,
but
I
I
could
don't
see the
love that
Bears,
pick
but
personally. But
I just
and I do think he
shouldn't.
goes to Atlanta. But I know Justin Fields was like, man, I'd love to play with Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah.
And I know they have DJ Moore, but Chicago probably thinks they could still add another receiver. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't count out the Bears at number 9.
No, I think that's fine. I think that's fair
Yeah.
too. I just,
But I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I mean, obviously, I don't think the Bears should, but if they draft, there and Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only one in that conversation for them.
Yeah.
If there wasn't that connection, I don't necessarily think he would be, but it wouldn't shock me. You're right.
No. For me, how many are we going to see go in the first round? JSN, Addison, and Flowers are the 3 locks for me. They all just got green room invites, which kind of is like, all right, they're going to go in the first round probably. And it really just feels that way. Those are all first round guys. I think I'm 95 to 90% confident Quentin Johnson goes in the first round, but
Yeah.
there's still that slight off chance because I do think teams see some of those flaws. And the biggest thing, helmet scouting is one hell of a problem. It is, but it does exist. A lot of these teams rely on connections to other teams. And I know when it comes to the receiver position at TCU, there isn't a great history there, nor does there seem to be all that great of a connection now because of it. I think, honestly, if I had to project it, Johnson is a very likely bet, even to go as high as 12 to the Texans, 14 to the Patriots. He will very likely be a first round guy, but I'm not going to lock him in just yet. Slight chance he could fall out of the first round. And then after that, I think we're probably going to get a Josh Downs or a Jalin Hyatt to slide into the first round. Although I'd give it like a 50% chance we see a Hyatt or a Down slide into the back end there. Maybe even 45%. I'm kind of coming off that a little bit. Maybe a Kincaid slides in instead at the tight end position or something.
Like,
But in terms of first round grades, JSN, easy. Pencil that in. Quentin Johnson probably gets a late first round grade for me.
yeah, he just almost has to, man.
The upside is crazy. It's crazy. And then Addison and Flowers are very much on the fringe for me. They're very much just, Johnson's here, they're right here, the two of them. So they're like on the cusp first round type of prospects for me. Then after that, again, Marvin Mims was my wide receiver 5. I like Mims, but I'd probably give him no higher than like a second round grade. And it's not an early second round grade by any means. So that's where I stand on that. Let's talk Jalin Hyatt real quick for a second before we get to sleepers, because we literally just threw him out as a first round prospect, but we haven't talked about him. None of us had him in the top 5. I personally am super, super low on Jalin Hyatt. I don't understand the first round buzz at all. If he goes in the first round, that just is the measuring stick that tells me just how tantalized the NFL has become with speed. Because when you look at it, this is a slender receiver that faced pretty much free releases 24/7, feasted off blown coverages left and right. I'm sorry, but on tape, yeah, he showed me he's a burner down the field. He's fine at comeback routes. I think he sets those up well with his vertical speed. So yeah, he's a burner downfield, but what else does he do? Didn't show me much after the catch. I mean, yes, I have to give him credit. He's an early declare out of the SEC. Like, that's a big thing for me in terms of, because I just harped on that earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, on tape, he didn't show me a lot as a route runner. Wasn't tested by much press coverage. Again, slender frame, doesn't do a whole lot with the ball in his hands. And even for a vertical guy, a lot of it was just blown coverages, well designed by Tennessee, kind of bad defense. Hyatt does not wow me at all. Like, if he goes in the first round, I think I hate to like sound negative, but it's a terrible pick.
No.
I agree.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Like, I just wanted to address that real quick because he's a first round guy that we didn't get to talk about. But now let's talk about sleepers. These are guys that didn't crack our top fives, but we want to shed some light on. We really like them as prospects. Marissa, why don't you go first for this?
I'm going to go to Penn State. I'm going to go with Parker Washington. Look, you look what he did at their 1,920 yards, right? Extremely reliable. You pass that ball to him, he has a great catch radius. He is going to haul it in. That is what really stood out when watching him, is you could go to him in any situation and he was hauling that ball in. I think he only had like 8 drops over the 3 seasons that he played. That is a reliable guy right there. And you know that he's going to be able to get the yards after catch. That obviously really stood out, is the reliability and the ability to get those yards after catch. He's obviously not top 5. I put him more like, again, 7 and 8 range in my receiver rank. Maybe 7-6. I want to say 8. 7-6 is like right around that range that I would put him. Just because he has a smooth route running, came in, made an impact in his freshman season. Being able to do that, come in, make a freshman impact in the Big Ten.
Right.
That's going to translate to the NFL. That's going to be a guy underrated, but a guy that you can rely on day one.
I like freshman production in the Big Ten. I do. I like it a lot. Logan, who are you going with as your favorite sleeper?
I really do like Parker Washington a lot. He was one of the guys I was going to harp on as well. But to throw, give another name out there, I really like Trey Palmer from Nebraska too.
Good shout.
We talk about, I just don't understand how a guy like Trey Palmer, like if people love Jalin Hyatt, why don't you love Trey Palmer? Like, those are the things that don't make sense to me. I know he's a little smaller, but he's, was way better with a worse situation with, just there's more things to like there for me. They grade out pretty similarly, which, I think is how they should be viewed. But Trey Palmer, man, he's such a good athlete. He's super fast. You look at Nebraska, you're like, oh, Nebraska. He went to LSU as a 5-star recruit, so he's good. He's not just some nobody that came out of nowhere. It took him some time to kind of get adjusted. He's a junior, but he's still a little bit, not older, but he's pretty average to a little bit above average age for a prospect. But he is 6'1" and ran like a 4.33, I believe. So he has the height, he has the speed, and you don't have to spend crazy high capital on him to get him. And I think those are where you find the sweet spot for your guys that are your field stretchers and your burners. And that's what he is at the very least. He's got a lot more to his game than just that. But at the very, very least, he can stretch the field for you. He can contribute on special teams. He can just be your speedster that opens up the field a little bit. There's just a lot to like with him, just simply from an athletic standpoint. And the tape's pretty damn good too.
I will say just some other Trey Palmer stuff, because I've had these stats. Joe O'Leary on Twitter tweeted these out because I was doing some Trey Palmer stuff over the winter for after the Senior Bowl. A lot of intriguing metrics to back this up as well. He's 21 years old. He had a 32.6% target share, which is a 96th percentile mark. Like, that's monster stuff. 39.3% receiving yard market share, which is the best in this class. A 3.07 yards per team passing attempt, which is also best in this class, and a 46.1% dominator rating, which is 93rd percentile. At LSU, he was a bit disappointing, but man, with the Cornhuskers, was he a good player. I do think there are still holes and all that, but on day 3, you want a vertical guy. I think in the right scheme, he could be a really nice complementary piece. So I do like that shout. I think Palmer's underrated. I have 2 names real quick. Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State. I get it. It kind of goes against my whole... Here's the thing with these sleepers, okay? Not all of them. When you get eventually after the top guys, you're not getting a lot of SEC or Big Ten guys that are early declares. Stuff like that. Xavier Hutchinson started off at a JUCO college, okay? And he's now a redshirt senior coming from the Big 12. That doesn't put him in a very enticing bucket in terms
Yeah.
of the early declare conference of play type of stuff. But man, he just came to the Cyclones, produced like a madman for 3 years with 2 different quarterbacks, one of which was Brock Purdy, by the way. But had a near 30% college target share. He's got a big frame. He wins at the line of scrimmage. He wins over the middle of the field. He's got a big catch radius. I think he can occasionally line up outside, although I really do like him more as a big slot that can just move the chains. Not super dynamic necessarily, because he's not going to make a ton of plays with the ball in his hands, not going to make a ton of plays vertically, but think Keenan Allen type. Not going to be Keenan Allen. That's the 100th percentile outcome. But as a day 3 dude, you want a chain mover, a big slot. Xavier Hutchinson's actually one of the more enticing slot receivers to me in this class. And then there's Michael Wilson out of Stanford. Man, I saw him at the Senior Bowl. Didn't know much about Michael Wilson until the Senior Bowl, to be completely honest with you. And I was like, Michael Wilson's getting all this hype, and I'm watching all the clips like, yeah, he looks good, but this just has to be one of those guys. Like, Then I do more digging. He's just been hurt.
Yeah.
Which is a concern. Don't get me wrong. I'll touch up on that in a minute. Don't get me wrong at all. But when he's on the field, he's produced pretty well. Not elite target share stuff, but big frame, pretty good athlete for his size. Again, big catch radius, pretty good route runner. Like, he kind of showcased the whole package. Nothing to an elite degree, but was like a very well-rounded receiver with the size to line up outside, which is something this class lacks. On top of that, too, Wilson was like a team captain. He brings tons of special teams value. People have raved about his character. So I think a lot of those micro things as well are really going to add up in these interviews. The risk is absolutely there because he missed so much time at Stanford.
Yeah.
He never had a season with over 700 receiving yards. He's a fifth-year senior out of the Pac-12. But when he was on the field, he produced. And I just think there's a lot to like outside of the football stuff. Again, team captain, special teams, which is a football thing. But just some of those micro things are really enticing as well that I like with Wilson. Yeah. So he is one of my favorite sleepers as well.
Another guy I wanted to throw out here real quick, just don't want to spend too much time talking about him. I think A.T. Perry is pretty interesting as well. Yeah. We talk about just, the importance of having an X. He's 6'5", so I think he could be able to do that at least decently well. But he can be moved around a lot. He needs some developing. He needs to improve as an athlete a little bit, get a little quicker. But 6'5", there's a lot to like with him. He needs to develop. He definitely does. But when you're looking in the mid rounds to the late rounds, people that can just outperform their draft position one day, I think A.T. Perry is probably at the top near the top of that list for me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to do it for our wide receiver sleepers. I appreciate everybody for tuning in and spending this time with us. Logan, Marissa, I really appreciate you guys for taking time out of your nights to go over all these prospects with me. We just talked tight ends as well. So if you missed out on that segment or any of our previous segments where I talked all the defensive prospects, offensive line, and all those rankings, sleepers, etc., make sure you check those out as well on our YouTube channel. You can find all of them on the NFL draft, the War Room playlist. So great stuff to watch if you're bored or you're looking for some more discussion on the draft. And we've got more coming on the way as we are under 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. We are all stoked here. Like, I am so excited. It's one of the best times of year in the NFL. But that's going to, again, do it for myself, Logan, and Marissa. We'll see you guys next time.